What if I told you that one of France's official executioners in the 1750s, the person trusted to carry out death sentences, wasn't who anyone thought? Picture this: a stern-faced hangman walking the streets of Lyon, feared by all, but beneath the uniform, she was a woman in disguise. Her name was Marguerite Le Paistour. For years, she lived as Henri, deceiving soldiers, priests, and even the courts. Her story is packed with danger, deception, and a final twist you won't believe. We begin a PhD from PhD distance at the storm-lashed, wind-whipped Cancale coast in Brittany. Here, on the 2nd of August 1720, Marguerite Julienne Le Paistour was born. Her life began in loss. Her mother had survived only 8 days after Marguerite's birth, and her father remarried not long afterward. The stepmother who came into the family, by all accounts, was hard and unloving. At such times, in a seaport town of France, there was no escape for a little girl except to run. And so, somewhere about the age of 20, Marguerite came to that turning point. She ran. However, being a French runaway woman in the 18th century was not merely a taboo, it was risky. She had to run the risk of going hungry and being attacked and imprisoned since she did not have anyone who could guard her. She must have a disguise as well as a dress. Marguerite cut her hair short, wearing men's clothing, nicked, no doubt, from her own brother, and chose a new name for herself, Henri. And from this time on, she would be a man. Her walk, her attitude, her speech, all needed to be just so, or one misstep would expose her and ruin her. Her first step into this new life was working for a priest. She worked for him for 5 years, doing the cooking and cleaning and chores, never once mentioning to anyone she was really Henri. She'd played her role so well that no one ever suspected Henri was merely some ordinary young fellow. However, Henri was not satisfied with the home assignments. Marguerite herself longed to be free, and that, in her own day, 18th century France, could only mean military service, which was an absolute impossibility for a woman. She disguised herself in order to enlist in the French army, pretending to be a fellow soldier named Henri. She also trained with the men, marched with them, and bunked with them, and became so much a part of them that she was unquestioned about where she belonged. She actually enlisted later in the Austrian army of Empress Maria Theresa, a step as adventurous as it was dangerous. Soldiering life was severe, the daily sheer marching, sleeping out in the cold, and always the risk of being injured or killed. But Marguerite faced all that. The uniform was a protection, and also a close approach to danger. Eventually, Marguerite gave up military life. She passed through Strasbourg, where she met the man who would change her life, a professional executioner. It was a career that combined expertise and power with terror. Executioners were outsiders, fearful of their role in justice, but even more shunned socially. It was a strange fraternity, and Henri had discovered how to join it. She apprenticed as the assistant to an executioner in Strasbourg, then moved on to Montpellier, where she mastered all the tricks of the trade: how to tie, how to employ the breaking wheel, how to conduct hangings efficiently. They were sinister abilities, but they were powerful as well. Henri was impeccable in this business. And then, the biggest leap of all, she requested to be made official executioner in Lyon. This was no behind-the-scenes job. This was a job available to the general public, hired by city officials, with official authority and remuneration. And unbelievably, she got it. For about 2 years, the people of Lyon believed their executioner was Henri Le Paistour. She organized communal punishments, hangings, and tortures, and executed the depressing services that were to be performed within the law. There was fear of executioners, yet they were important. The location of Henri in Lyon had changed into the scenery of Lyon. Secrets tend to come out. Marguerite did have a servant, a lady who lived in her house, and sooner or later, minor details must have started to arouse suspicions. It may have been some note to her voice, or just the manner of her movements, when she cannot think that anyone is looking. One morning the secret came out. Whether through confession, accident, or confrontation did not matter, and the servant betrayed her to the authorities. In 1749, Marguerite was arrested. She was charged not just with impersonating a man, but also with receiving stolen goods, a charge unrelated to her disguise, but adequate to keep her in prison. Tugged into Lyon's prison, the Maison de Rouen, Marguerite finally revealed her secret. She was not Henri. She was a woman who had existed under disguise for years, deceiving soldiers, priests, and the city itself. And this is the shock. Even when unchained, she never begged for mercy or confessed weakness. She told her life story openly to a visiting priest, Jean-Baptiste Richard, of how she preferred to punish women more than men in her line of work, and of her years of traveling and lying. Instead of shame, there was almost pride. Before I go on, if you find these lesser-known bits of history interesting, don't forget to subscribe and give this a thumbs up. They're not the stories you learn about in textbooks at school, but they're worth remembering. Now, on with Marguerite. Marguerite was imprisoned for about 10 months. It was during this time that her conversations with Father Richard became a recitation of her strange life. She told him about fleeing her stepmother, about having traveled for years dressed as a man, about being a soldier in 2 armies, and becoming an executioner. These were unselfish admissions. She had lived life on her own terms, as much as those terms involved breaking all convention for a woman of her era. Then there was the decision that freed her. Not a king's pardon, not a last-minute escape, but marriage. On 26 November 1749, Marguerite married Noel Roche, a servant to a nearby notary. Marrying in that time and place could actually reinstate a woman's civic identity and allow her to be released. Thus, the feared Henri vanished, and Marguerite Le Paistour reappeared on the world as she was. Back to Cancale, which she had quit so many years before. In Cancale, she had a daughter called Marguerite Marie Jacquemine. In the records, we never hear of her again. How long she lived, or whether or not anybody at Cancale ever discovered what her former career as the executioner of lions had been, we know not. All we do know is that during nearly 10 years, Marguerite had walked a narrow tightrope, because her life was vulnerable only insofar as she could continue to live as someone other than herself. The narrative of Marguerite is frightening and still motivating. She performed roles that were not permitted to her. She learned how to march like a soldier and how to cut off people like a killer. She lived in the fear of being found out on the one hand. On the other hand, in a sort of weird freedom, a freedom most women were not allowed at the time. There is further the question, how many other lives, no less significant, fell outside the record? How many women broke the rules, succeeded, and faded into history? If Marguerite's story stuck with you, share it. Someone out there will be inspired by her courage or outraged by her deception. And if you're interested in more stories of people who lived on the edges of history, subscribe and click that little bell. Because for every Marguerite Le Paistour, there are dozens more like her, waiting to be uncovered.